Good evening and welcome to Spectator TV Australia. I'm your host, online editor Alexandra Marshall, and we've got a quick update from Victoria and Terry Barnes, our double shot creator and political commentator. Terry, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's nice to be back. It's been quite a while, Alexandra.
It has, and I'm contacting you, Terry, because Victoria, the Liberal Party down there, did something completely crazy yesterday afternoon that nobody was expecting. They switched out their leader in somewhat of a rapid, violent coup. What happened?
Well, look, the Liberal Party in Victoria has a new leader. They have one every few months, I think. It's almost like the way the Italian politics used to work way back in the day. But certainly, yes, they swapped out. I think it's a good expression. Their leader from Brad Battin, former policeman, and Baker's Delight franchisee, so real world experience, Jess Wilson, who is very good in terms of her policy ability, but certainly comes from a stock standard Liberal Party career path as they are these days. University, staffordom, industry association, parliament. But certainly it was ironic because yesterday, the day it happened, uh, there was an opinion poll that was published by the Herald Sun newspaper that showed that Brad Battin was actually very much in charge as far as people warming to him in terms of being able to take on the Premier, Jacinta Allen, in terms of presumably law and order issues. And certainly the primary vote and the two-party preferred vote for the Liberal National Coalition in Victoria was ahead of Labor for the first time in quite a while. So, but no, that wasn't enough. He's gone. Jess Wilson, look, I think uh, she is, well, can I say, on the moderate side of the Liberal Party. So she's got some dripping wet social issues that she signed up for. And as I think you pointed out in a piece on Flat White, she was the one Liberal MP in Victoria who supported the Voice in 2023. Um, but she does have all-round policy ability, and I guess what they were saying is we're doing well against the Labor on law and order, but that's not good enough. And I think that broadly is right. You don't change governments based on campaigns against crime. You campaign against on cost of living, on housing affordability, on making sure that public services, infrastructure at a state level work. And there's a sense you should be able to do that more than him. But on the other hand, she's 35 in her first term of parliament. I think she needs to be blooded and have more experience. I think she would come more to the sensible centre right, given some time and given encouragement. But I just think it almost looks like a hospital pass to me. And the fact that the Liberals uh, really should be streets ahead of Labor at this stage, given the worst the worst economy in the country, infrastructure that is well over time and well over budget, uh, basic public services, not up to scratch, particularly hospitals. Our education system is the most indoctrinated and woke in the country. Uh, there's, the Aboriginal Treaty, um, the fact that the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow are being funded by Victoria, and all of this and more should be actually giving the opposition here so much to work with, but they're either just ahead, according to that poll I was talking about, or way behind, according to other polls. So, and my gut sense is that at this stage, the Liberals haven't done enough to put themselves in the box seat for the next election because it's not just the leader, they just haven't done the work.
But Terry, this is a real head scratcher. Nobody in their right mind, when they're in a difficult political situation, trying to recover from a disaster, because let's be honest, Prosciutto was dreadful. The entire thing was in free fall as far as Conservative voters. So we had Brad Battin. He wasn't exceptional, but he was moving the polls. He was making real headway, and he was critically starting to restore some stability and faith in the party. So why on earth would you take him out mid stride with a year to go on an election to replace him with a younger person with less experience and who is, by all accounts, a moderate and therefore poses a critical risk to the biggest benefit that Battin had, and that was his decision to take the treaty down within 100 days of government. That was the real point of difference between the Labor Party and the Liberal Party in Victoria. That's what would win them the election. And yet they've installed somebody who is famous for voting in favour of the Voice Truth Treaty referendum. Now, that seems to be an extraordinary political risk to take. So, is this factional or was it based on the numbers?
Well, look, on the treaty issue, she has recommitted to Brad Battin's position on that. So I'm assuming that won't change. In
But does
terms of
anybody
her,
believe her, Terry? Does anyone believe
well,
that?
well, look, let's just wait and see. My view on this is that I'm going to have to give her the benefit of the doubt, but what's done is done. They have to see her through to the election now because I think if they tried to chop and change again, they would be absolutely, well, more than stuff, they'd be totally rooted. But certainly, I think when it comes to why it happened, it wasn't really factional. I think it's even more basic than that. It's personalities and egos in the Victorian Liberal Party room in Parliament House in Melbourne. People with grand ambitions for themselves and grand tickets on themselves who have really thought about what Victorians need, but certainly have thought about what they need in terms of their own careers, in terms of their own power and influence. And I think the fatal thing for Brad Battin was about a month ago, he did a reshuffle and he disappointed the people who had supported him at the end of last year, and particularly some very ambitious, very self-opinionated MPs who believed that they were hard done by. And when you get hard done by egos in a small, viperous party room like that one, things were bound to happen. And certainly supporters went from being supporters to plotters overnight. And I think that was the final straw. But on the other hand, I think the coalition was too much focused on law and order and not much else. And I think if they're going to win the election, you're not going to change a government on law and order and crime. I mean, that's a factor. It's a big factor. What you need to do is focus on the fact that the Victorian economy is so badly damaged by Labor that anybody who can promise a coordinated program of budget repair actually is prepared to do the hard yards, but also prepared to promise pain as well as gain, which is what Jeff Kennett did in Victoria in the early 1990s, is going to succeed. But you've actually got to do the hard work to do that. You've got to actually you've got to listen, you've got to consult, and then you've actually got to develop the policy, alternative remedies to the absolute schmozzle that Labor has brought on this state over the last decade.
Well, Terry, I mean, David Crisafulli and the Queensland Liberal Party did win an election on law and order, but because they were a point of difference with Labor, Labor refused to go tough on youth crime. David Crisafulli said, well, I'm going to do it. And people said, great, you have a go because we're sick of having our homes broken into and our cars stolen. But in Victoria, you are correct because Jacinta Allen has looked at Queensland. She's copied and pasted Crisafulli's policies and brought them in. So there's nowhere for the Liberal Party to move on law and order in Victoria unless they want to bring in, I don't know, hard labour on the railroad work. There's not really anywhere further they can escalate that conversation. So it doesn't matter if she pledges allegiance to law and order. It doesn't matter if she pledges health was her other one. Budgeting is about the only thing she has in her favour. What people are saying, Terry, is the biggest issue in Victoria is going to be this treaty. People are absolutely furious that Jacinta Allen ignored the referendum results in which Victoria voted no and has installed a racial privilege and discrimination and a parallel parliament down there with huge expense to public money. And now the Liberals have got a leader who, in principle, went out on a limb and said, I basically agree with this. Whether she says she will retract it or not, it doesn't inspire confidence on the important cultural issues, Terry.
Well, look, I'd differ from you a little bit. I'd say treaty is an issue, not the issue, but it is certainly part of the great wheelbarrow of issues that the coalition should be wheeling towards electoral victory in 12 months' time. Absolutely. But look, I think the problem is with law and order, as you outlined it, is not just borrowing from David Christodoulou, it's actually borrowing from Brad Battin. And effectively, Brad Battin was snookered by his own policies, by his own agenda. But the problem for him politically was that was pretty well it as far as that agenda went. And then the coalition is totally woefully underprepared in terms of budget repair, economic management, offering alternative solutions to Victoria's infrastructure problems. And if Jess Wilson can take that on and put the ideology aside, then good luck to her. But my gut sense is I wouldn't have done it this way. What I would have done with Brad Battin, if I was in the party room, which thank goodness I'm not, is to not tap him on the shoulder to quit, but actually go to him and say, well, look, mate, we've got to broaden our front here. We've actually got to show that we have a broad offering we can give to Victorians, but we're actually dealing with their central issues, particularly around budget repair and cost of living. You've got 3 months to shape up or ship out on that. So basically giving him a warning, not a booting. And my sense is that if to the extent that, and I think Jess Wilson has got a lot of ability. I mean, yes, okay, I hear you about some of the things she's advocated and believes in, but as a shadow minister, ironically, she's been probably the only consistent one since the last election. So she's competent. But is that enough? And when you're 35, you're first term in Parliament, yeah, she's got a political pedigree in terms of a family background and what she's done before going into Parliament. But the reality is, you've got to stamp your authority on people whose belief in any other person stamping their authority is absolutely non-existent. And there are certain individuals in that party who will want their pound of flesh for switching their allegiance from Battin to Wilson as well.
But also, the other major point of contest between the Conservatives and Labor, or at least the potential point of contest, is net zero. Another thing that Jess Wilson is famous for being on board with and has worked in the net zero industry. She's certainly she's an advocate for it, and so if it comes to ditching net zero or in any way pursuing a policy that is back toward energy reality, as the federal Liberals are being pushed toward with their coalition partners, the Nationals, ditching net zero across every state. How is this going to play out? Because the net zero is tied to one of the critical reasons why Victoria is in debt. It's why the Victorian Liberals have lost their support in regional Victoria because of all these huge renewable industries that have gone through farmland, through bushland, and all the legalities around whether or not you can oppose this have been changed. If she is a true believer in it, how can any of these regional areas trust that they will have their rights protected under a Liberal government, that things will change under a Liberal government, and also that the economy of the state will be brought back into control if net zero is perpetuating the debt?
Well, it's a good question. Look, I think the Nationals in Victoria are going to be the tail that wags the dog, just as they have been federally on net zero. My sense, though, is that party room, it's not just Jess Wilson, if you're going to talk about it that way. I think it's the majority of that party room probably would feel very similar to her in terms of her previously expressed views and her previous engagement, particularly with the Business Council of Australia on energy policy and climate change. Look, my sense is that the Victorian Liberals need to get that sorted out. My feeling is that they will resist doing what the Feds have done with net zero. They will do what Mark Speakman and his Liberals have done in New South Wales and basically said, oh, well, the Feds can say what they like, but we're going to go with it because we believe in it. I think that's politically damaging for them. I think you're right about, particularly in regional Victoria, particularly where these solar farms and wind turbines have fruit themselves all over the place and then taking prime agricultural land away as well. But really, I think they are incapable of prosecuting an argument whichever way they go. I just don't think they have the talent. I don't think they have the work ethic. I don't think they have the drive to actually prosecute an argument on anything at the moment. I don't really feel very confident about the current Liberal Party room, so that 30-odd upper and lower house MPs, actually being able to win a political case against the Labor machine that is exceedingly strong and will take any sign of weakness and throw it back.
I'm going to put a scenario to you, Terry, that I've heard people saying today, and that is the Victorian Liberal power brokers and the New South Wales Liberal power brokers are putting together a moderate wall against the federal Liberals, because as we're seeing, the federal Liberals have had to start to pivot to the right. The moderates are being wiped out federally because things like net zero and the referendum on the voice to parliament and other cultural issues which are changing around the world are starting to impact our domestic politics. And so if somebody like, not really Andrew Hastie, but somebody like an Angus Taylor, if he was to get in power and he was to try and change the political narrative for Conservatives in this country from the top down, people are saying, well, if you've got two of the most powerful states, Victoria and the Liberal New South Wales parties there against him, will that prevent a federal Liberal Party from executing a new policy direction if the moderates maintain their power in the states?
But that's a difficult question to answer, not in terms of the principle, but in terms of how it works. My sense is that state divisions, Liberal Party, are laws unto themselves, and basically the law of self-preservation applies at state level. That means if they repudiate what their federal colleagues do, they repudiate it. My sense is the composition of the Victorian Party room, I'm not so much an expert on New South Wales, but certainly seems much the same, is predominantly moderate leaning, and they don't give a stuff about what the feds do, as long as they maintain their purity. But it's easy to maintain your purity in permanent opposition, isn't it? But certainly I think this is part of the problem of the Liberal Party in the way that it's been structured by Menzies, in terms of having independent state divisions with a very weak centre over the top of them. I think when there are points of national policy like this, particularly net zero is a very good example, that if the feds take a position, the state should actually come into line with it. And I think that's one of the things we're talking about, the future of the Liberal Party, the future of centre-right politics in Australia, that we have to actually come to terms with, so that good, sensible decision-making, even if it was dragged kicking and screaming to at the federal level, should apply across the whole party, not selectively by state division.
Well, I've got one final question for you, but I must say on that point, Terry, I think the only thing that will frighten the moderates into changing their position on something like net zero is going to be if one nation were to jump over them in the polls. I don't think their egos or their vanity could survive being outpolled by Pauline Hanson, given some of the things they've said about her. That may be the number one motivating cause for them, Terry. But I've seen a couple of names being thrown around down the bottom. We've got Sam Groth, who's the deputy, and we've got Bev MacArthur, who I've got a lot of time for. She's had some great speeches in Parliament lately. Is there some hope that maybe these forces behind the new Crown down there can moderate Jess Wilson back toward a more conservative leaning base?
I I think that the leadership team is as much a part of the problem as the rest of the parliamentary party in Victoria, and I think that's a real concern for me, that they're too busy fighting each other, too busy playing factional games, too busy pursuing personal ambition to think about the broader picture of what all Victorians need. One of the things that struck me about Jess Wilson's press and media yesterday was that she kept talking about the party room has spoken. It's what she offers the party room. It's not what she offers the party room. It's what she offers all Victorians. And I think she has to think about that. In terms of One Nation, look, I might have a different view on this to you, but my sense is that, if you're a One Nation supporter, don't assume that your party's jump in the polls is all down to One Nation. I don't think it is. I think it's down to disgruntled Liberal voters parking their discontent and sending a message. And most of those are quite well, very soft, and they could quite well jump back if the right the right people, the right leadership, the right policies actually start to emerge. So, but I think the fact that One Nation has caught that dissatisfaction in the short term is something that certainly I think the Liberal Party needs to think about, and also the National Party in the longer term.
Yeah, well, it's also giving the Greens something to think about with One Nation polling double the Greens numbers. So that's an interesting turnaround there, Terry. But look, thank you very much for your insights into Victoria. It's certainly not the news item that we expected to be covering this week. A lot of people were there. They were shaking their heads, Terry, thinking you can't help some parties. You know, they had a good thing with Brad Battin, and now we've got Jess Wilson. And, you know, you'd say giving people the benefit of the doubt, but I think it's going to be a pretty short leash for Jess Wilson. And she's not going to have a lot of time to prove herself because voters are pretty tired, Terry. They're getting to the end of their ability to tolerate this sort of thing. So let's hope
Well,
that it
they
all
are,
works out well for them.
but that's the thing. That's the thing. I think to actually have a change of government, you need a viable opposition to jump to, a viable alternative to jump to. And up till now, and I suspect beyond now, Victorian voters will not have that. The question is, can that be fixed by next November, whoever is the leader? And I think they've made their choice now. I think Jess Wilson has to be seen through. There's no alternative. But whether it's going to work, it's going to be very, very difficult to I can't see it working successfully myself, though I have nothing against her personally. I just think that she's got so much baggage to deal with, and that's not just her; it's her party room, it's her party that it's going to be very hard. But what she needs are hard heads around her, and that includes conservative heads who are prepared to actually knock other heads together to get the work done, but also to make sure that the policies are there in place by the time that campaigning gets really serious in the middle of next year.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, Terry. And thank you for joining us here today on Spectator TV.
Always a pleasure.